Personally, I believe horror is best suited to smaller game experiences. The longer a game goes on, the more you have to rely on mechanics to keep the game enjoyable. Either it's fun to play, and slowly distracts from the horror, or it's quite stressful and terrifying and you get desensitized to it over a long playthrough. Of course, this isn't guaranteed or inherent to the genre, but just something I feel personally crops up from time to time. But I think a lot of others see it my way too, with the prevalence of horror-themed game jams. If you don't know, a game jam is a collective project where many people develop a game with a unifying theme in a short time, anywhere from 24 hours to a week or two. There are more of these than anyone could possibly keep track of and can offer so many unique or interesting concepts. Ones that are being tested for future projects and others that work best as a smaller experience. So with all of that in mind, something like the Dread X collection becomes a no-brainer. A horror game collection filled with 10 short games developed in 7 days, each from a veteran indie game creator. It was released in May of 2020, and since then, the series has chronicled 5 whole entries. But with Halloween season upon us, I thought it would be fun to dive into this darling collection and review each and every game included. I'm going to give a brief overview on how each title is presented and introduced, then go one by one. But even though I will be basically spoiling each of these by covering them, I still recommend you play the collection, even if it's just to experience the one or two that really interest you. It's literally only $6 on Steam, which is an absolute steal. I really hope to see this project revived one day, so feel free to support it. But without further ado, let's get into it. So upon booting the game, you get presented with the game selection menu. A large mirror is surrounded by 10 icons, each of them representing a different game. Once one is selected, the mirror shows the title of the game with a small screen, and more importantly, the table beside it has a letter and a manual setup. The letter is a fun bit of preamble, either just explaining some aspect of the setting or just creating some atmosphere. Then the manual has some details on the controls and anything else you might need to know. Finally, you jump right in by clicking the mirror with the game selected, which boots up another window. I will say it's a little clunky, just to keep in mind. The UI doesn't really fit when it's set to 1080p, and the separate windows for the games is just a bit messy. But this was not constructed on a big budget, and future titles do a lot more with this setup. So, for now, don't worry about it. We're gonna follow the order of the games, clockwise around the mirror, starting with The Pay Is Nice. Developed by Oddbreeze, who made the game Crew 167, though I haven't played it much, and I don't know anything about them really. This is easily the most ambitious game narratively in the collection, I'd say, with maybe one other exception we'll see later. You play as a scientist of sorts, working at a very mysterious company. The game plays with the classic tank controls as seen in the first Silent Hill or Resident Evil games. You explore this facility and complete tasks set out for you. Also, you can get that sweet, sweet paycheck. What I like most about this is the effective writing. Throughout the game, it sort of narrates the actions happening, either like off-screen or just out of view that your character's performing. It's always in short, stern lines, strictly dictating each action. It's supposed to sort of emulate the instructions the character receives and follows without a second thought. It's a satire of the boring bureaucracy found by some of the workers in what's probably a standard, like, super evil chemistry lab, like Umbrella Corp or something in the real world. The main character doesn't think about what he's doing, what effect it has on people, or how ethical any of it is. He just follows the instructions because the pay is nice. I also really like the fixed camera angles. There's actually some unnerving cinematography in this game that's done pretty well. The minigame to determine the drug combination is fun, but a little bit more predetermined than I thought I would be. I'd love to see it expanded in some other project, as it feels like a fun puzzle, but here it's just a glorified set of instructions to follow, which of course does play into the theme. Overall, it was pretty interesting. Not really frightening to me personally, but definitely fun and very creepy. It's got some proper scares in there. My biggest problem is just that the ending was very unceremonious. I think even a generic jump scare would have been a little bit better than the anticlimax I found. I still liked it though. I'm gonna give it a 7 out of 10. Don't Go Out. This is a very interesting one. Developed by Secret Crow Level, who have made only one other game called Doom Trooper. The reason I find it particularly curious is this is one of the few real gameplay-focused entries in Dread X. You play as a survivor, avoiding this mysterious and deadly red muck which comes in the form of these small monsters and creeping infectious web. Each turn you have a few actions and a few cards. You can either move, wait, kill that character, or use a card. The cards will give you more actions, more survivors, more cards, or some light. All you have to do is survive. The monsters will chase you down, and the web will grow and grow until it consumes all tiles. Either of those things touching a character will instantly kill them. I think the mechanics are interesting. It feels suitably desperate, and I like how the light makes information such a resource. It feels fairly well balanced, at least once you figure out that you need to use the house to survive the very last turn or two. The pixel art is very charming. It really doesn't look like it was thrown together in a week. A successful run will only be a few minutes long, but it will take quite a few tries to get it down right. Of course it's simplistic, but that works to its benefit. But its largest problems are probably the lack of any real tutorial, leading you to figure out things out on your own. That can be good, but I still don't understand what the sacrifice card does. A little direction would go a long way. Besides that, of course it's a little shallow, no narrative to speak from besides what you can draw from the art and the situation, and the game mechanics definitely don't support anything longer than a few runs. But luckily, that's all you need. Not particularly scary, however, but it's sufficiently horror-themed. The blood, desperation, and the death. Ambitious, yet aware of its limitations, it's pretty ideal. I'm gonna give it an impressive 9 out of 10. Now, Hand of Doom. I loved this one. Developed by Torpal Duck, this is a bizarre little puzzle experience, I guess. It's a loving tribute to old PC games. Your movements are slow and clunky, and there's a large menu off to the side. You're released from your prison by some mysterious entity. There you find a book of ancient spells that lets you cast incantations. The 4 chants provided to you make up the spells throughout the game. You can use any of them, you just have to know the correct order and pattern in order for the spell to actually work. So using the incantation you heard from the man, you can enter this large courtyard with many various wizards around the place. You're given odd and arcane orders from forces beyond your understanding, leading you through these small experiences, mysteries, and puzzles. There isn't really any way to lose, so the actual game doesn't convey much challenge or stress, which for some people might be the biggest issue with it, but I found each obstacle to feel justified and still be satisfying to venture through. What really sells it is these visuals. Like I mentioned, it looks like an old PC game, but with the human hands that appear to cast the chants, they resemble like a compressed FMV sort of thing. The vibes are just immaculate because of that. The interesting method of interaction with the world is just so fascinating. More than any other games in this entire collection, this game made me long for more. I wanted to experience more of this. I felt there's just so much potential, and it barely even scratches the surface of it. Funnily enough, this does in fact have a full version. Released in 2023, Hand of Doom got a standalone release. I really want to give it a try. Regardless, it's one I don't feel the need to narrate bit by bit. However, the end is suitably fun, where it's revealed you're not banishing the soul of the old master, but instead releasing him. I love the discovery of spells. Some are completely missable, saving you just time or making things a little easier. It makes the game feel bigger than it is and adds to the atmosphere of mystery and ancient magics that you slowly have to learn. The art style is charming and exciting. It doesn't drag on even like a second longer than it needs to with its rudimentary gameplay systems. It doesn't try to scare you per se, but the ritual sacrifice, the blood, the weird chanting, all of it makes it creepy enough to more than fit in this collection. Maybe it's a little bit too generous or whatever, but personally, it's exactly what I want from a short game concept, so I'm gonna give this one a tentative 10 out of 10. Summer Nights, developed by Aired-Off, best known for the Faith trilogy. I've only played the first Faith game, but I liked it quite a lot. Scary, simple, very playful in how it creates its world. You can see a lot of that in Summer Nights. This was a great one. One of the shortest, it only took me like 11 minutes to experience the whole thing. You play a classic LCD handheld, most similar to something like a Game & Watch. The art is adorable and so instantly likable, and because of its simplistic visuals, it's able to look so much more professional than most of the other games in the collection. It feels refined and quite polished. It's a smart way to approach a game jam sort of project. As the player, you run around collecting mushrooms. There's a surprising amount of depth for something this quick and short. Eventually monkeys get added, which block an area for a while. Then these evil poisonous mushrooms that damage you if you don't run away fast enough. But of course, there isn't really like a fail state. You just sort of move around it without struggling too much. Slowly, the game starts to glitch, and the graphics morph and deteriorate. It's never too overt, never ruining the player character or truly breaking reality. I think they're more charming than scary. What does slowly get to you are the very sparsely used sounds playing in the background. Once every few minutes, only like 2 or 3 times throughout the game, you can hear a sound in the room around you. A knocking at the door, a bit of wheezing. The sound design's pretty immaculate. That goes for the bleeps and bloops of the game too, honestly. They're realistic, fun, and cut through the silence, making it almost more intense rather than less. There's no music outside of these small bonus stages. If the mushrooms aren't spawning and you aren't moving, it's silent. So when the game leaves you with a few moments of quiet, you almost feel the need to move just to generate the sound and the comfort it brings. But that just emphasizes how uncomfortable you feel. It works great. The ending scene is also just as charming in a very different way. Eventually, you run out of charge, and the player puts the game down. You end up in this adorable little 3D space with the task to find batteries. But after going down the stairs, more likely than not, you get attacked by the ghost in the game. You can actually find some batteries and continue playing, but either way it counts as a sort of ending. It's a little embarrassing at how well it worked on me, since my footage is affected by me jumping as I saw the thing. Sorry you can't get a good look at it. I appreciate that there isn't some big scream or loud noise, it's just a slow, weird hum and the view of something that shouldn't be there moving towards you. I like this one a lot. I find so much to love in something that is simple but effective. I like the ambition just as much as in this as any other of the grander games in this collection. So 9 out of 10. Outsiders, from developer Mahalik, best known for SCP Blackout. I would say this is easily the most standard horror game experience in the collection. I don't necessarily mean that as a bad thing, it just definitely feels typical. You walk around a house looking for keys and items, all in order to flip some switches and reveal the secret of the situation. All the while, you're stalked by some creatures aiming to scare you and then kill you. Each time you die, the game becomes slightly easier as items slowly begin to appear in the same place each run, and hints appear scrawled out on the walls in blood. The puzzles themselves aren't particularly interesting. You find a crate with a loose lid, so you need to bring a crowbar with you so you can open it. The only real purpose of them is to waste your time, as a successful run has to be shorter than 12 minutes. So ideally, this game doesn't take too long to beat, but it will absolutely take a while to get everything down. Personally, this was the game that took me longest to finish out of the whole collection. And that's definitely where it started getting on my nerves. Since the gameplay isn't particularly deep, and the mystery isn't interesting enough to sustain my attention, it started to feel like a bit of a slog. I do, however, like the general creepiness. The 2 monsters that can actually hurt you aren't the most interesting. There's one in the backyard, and the invisible one with bloody handprints. But the general ambiance does a good job. Lots of little auditory bumps and clatters, previously turned on lights will switch off, and the best part is you can see a few figures in the corner of your eye surrounding the house. At least in theory, usually you have long enough to get a nice solid stare right at them. I find this one a bit difficult to fully rate. I think its biggest sin is just that if I go to Steam or itch.io and switch to the most recently released horror games, I could find like 10 more that offer a pretty identical experience all in all. I think if it was balanced in a bit more of a player-friendly way, and it didn't run like crap, it would be a positive experience, but as it is, I'm gonna give it a 4 out of 10. Mr. Bucket Told Me To. This one was developed by the team Strange Scaffold, which is a delightful indie studio. They're probably best known for I Am Your Beast, or El Paso Nightmare, or Space Warlord Organ Trading Simulator, just to name a few. Now for Mr. Bucket Told Me To, I like the idea and the vibes of this one, but it really struggles with execution. It takes place on an island where you assume the player has been stranded. Broken parts off of a plane dot the corners, and you have to make yourself a couple of friends who help you survive. The dialogue is pretty entertaining, even if it's sparse, But once you do go to bed at the end of the day, you're confronted with your past mistakes. Your old friend Mr. Bucket, whom you'd previously killed. He demands a sacrifice of one of your new partners each night, leaving you worse and worse each day. Like I said, the vibes and concept are great. I love the happy music during the day, which then gets distorted and uncomfortable at night. I find it pretty cute, and it's over quite quickly, so it works well. Biggest problem for me is that the survival mechanics just kind of don't work. I barely understood how the poop or towel stuff was supposed to happen, and since you're just meant to die, it feels like a walking sim with extra steps. I think the survival bits just had a bit more actual game to them, and it was a little bit more clearly communicated. You'd feel the struggle, and it would make it a lot better. You'd feel the impact of losing each of these tools. This way, it's just a bit too thin to actually invest yourself, even in the smallest of ways. But of course, I am asking a lot from a 7-day project. Otherwise, there isn't too much to write home about. I like the funny look at a man slowly going insane, self-destructing from the guilt of disposing of a useless tool. But I think it frustrates me because it's so close to being so much better. So I'm just gonna give it a flat 5 out of 10. Rock Gut, developed by SnowRunner Productions, best known for Soda Drinker Pro. I kind of love Rock Gut, even though it kind of sucks. It's definitely comparable to Soda Drinker Pro, as they're both weird and atmospheric games, without too much of the game bit in them. In Rock Gut, you find yourself in a city with a flyer giving you directions. Follow them and you'll arrive at a large tunnel with a set of train tracks all the way through it. You walk to the end of the tunnel, then walk back. There's no real ending. Some of the events, I believe, are randomized, but they're all small and weird. It's all just very weird. It's why I like it. But I can imagine most people really won't. It is a slow, almost agonizing experience at some points, despite its 20-minute runtime. I really liked the graffiti adorning the walls of the tunnel. It's so much fun looking through all of it. But the game started to get a lot more boring when the art dried up, and I was just walking through a tunnel for a while. It isn't particularly scary, either. There are some sort of spooky sound effects, and an absolutely hilarious visual effect, which might be trying to scare me, but all in all, I was laughing more than being scared. It's bizarre, divisive, and kind of nothing. I very lovingly give it a 4 out of 10. Pony Factory, developed by David Zimansky, trying my best there, better known for things like Dusk, Iron Lung, and Gloomwood. Dusk is one of my favorite indie games of all time, so I had a lot of hopes for this. It's an odd little FPS horror experience inspired by, 1950s sci-fi films. The player explores a dark, disgusting, and industrial pony factory, a large machine designed to warp people into these horrible equine monsters. The gameplay itself is of course very simple. Manage health and ammo as you fight your way through the shadowy building. Some of the ponies charge at you, while others stand on their hind legs and fire hellish magic at you in order to attack. It attempts to balance horror with humor, which I think a lot of the best horror stuff does. But overall, this one doesn't do too much for me. The gameplay definitely feels like a default Unity player control module, without that much complication. However, there's an attempt at depth. You can't shoot with your gun and shine with your flashlight at the same time. Light in general is used as a resource in and of itself. And there are a couple moments where it really works. You wander in on an idle pony, or the only light in the room is your muzzle flashes and the magic flung at you. The inspiration isn't really felt in the narrative, but the entire aesthetic is dripping with it. It works really well. It's mostly in black and white, with great enemy designs for the titular ponies. Nice and freaky. But the occasional stark color breaks up the monotony and leaves it quite a visually fun time. It just doesn't really do enough to leave a proper impression. It does a good job, but it doesn't leave me with much to think about. The story progresses in a cute way, where you discover the core of the hellish power that runs the factory, but as you escape, you find out that the player character is just as evil, and they want to build their own army with it. An adorably depressing tone, which I think is more charming than it is anything else. Very middle of the road when it comes to short horror experiences, mostly saved by its relatively strong visuals and weird tone. The 20-minute playtime is appreciated, and I don't think this would work stretched out any longer. However, I do believe there's a full release which, like, works properly. For example, I went into the negative on my ammo multiple times and just kind of nothing happened. I think the level design is solid, all things considered, but just there isn't enough to go off of here. And especially compared to the rest of this developer's catalog, and even some future games they made for Dread X, which I've played already, are great. So, I don't know. It's only going to get a 6 out of 10 from me. Shatter. Developed by Lovely Hellplace, makers of Dread Delusion. This is one of the most visually enticing games of the entire creation, in my opinion. I absolutely love the odd setting and beautifully contrasting vibrant colours. A post-apocalyptic Britain ruled over by odd AI eldritch gods in the shape of flies. At first you only see a drab and dead environment. It's when you hook up with a neural implant that you see your new overlords. The atmosphere is so much fun, and I really can't get enough of it. The writing's fairly substantial, since there are a few little documents scattered around, as well as the NPCs. I found it fairly entertaining. The progression's also very simple. You just sort of explore and make it through area to area. The map isn't too packed, and there are only like 3 points of interest once you get hooked up with the implant. I think its 2 weakest elements are the slow sprint and the enemies that you slowly sprint away from. Since the map is relatively big compared to a lot of these other games, you just sort of trot along for like a majority of the playtime, and this game is on the slightly longer side of this collection, being like 30 minutes. I think the reason for it is that it's the only way there's any challenge to the small encounters with the enemies. The last stretch of the game has you retrieving an item from the other world. Once you find it, enemies appear across the map, and the landscape changes to this like Silent Hill-inspired other form. I love the metal grating on the floor, which is definitely a direct pull from Silent Hill. It's great. The enemies just aren't that particularly interesting. You just have to run past them, and then the game basically ends. So overall, it just lives and dies off its visual aesthetic and general writing strength, which is pretty great. But there isn't much depth or challenge, and the generally run-down vibe is the closest to horror you're getting. So I am pretty positive, but I wish the gameplay was just a tad better so I could truly love it. Gonna give it a 7 out of 10. Carthunk. Now, this is one that was a bit of a trial for me. Developed by Scythe Dev Team, who's probably best known for Happy's Humble Burger Farm. I think the setting is pretty interesting, all things considered. You explore the ruins of a long-dead alien planet and slowly put together a mummy. However, I found myself confused at first, then frustrated. It's a little unclear how to start, as you need to prop up your tripod to shine a light on a specific symbol to open the first door and start the first trial. But every trial after that just opens on their own, so there's not much consistency there. They mostly are just trials of platforming, and it's a bit of a mixed bag. I am a defender of first-person platforming. I think it can be done in a pretty fun way, but this really isn't one of those cases. I found it either to be way too easy or way too frustrating without much in between. The first is you remembering a code on one side of a large room, jumping along, and then inputting it on the other. The next trial is probably my favorite, where you flip a switch that slowly returns to its normal position, so while the timer ticks down, you have to make it to the top of this spiraling room fast enough. Then there is a decent, but sort of boring Raiders of the Lost Ark moment where you outrun this large rolling cylinder trying to crush you. Though right after, you have to climb all the way back up in a long, tight hallway, which just takes forever. And finally, the game ends after you make your way through a spike and swinging axe-filled obstacle course. God, this one was needlessly annoying, especially since you regen health at an agonizingly slow pace. So after walking half a centimeter forward towards the side of a tall spike, you get damaged so bad you have to wait for like 20 to 30 seconds before messing up again right after. All the while in the main hub, you're chased by these needless enemies. I'm really not a fan of the trope of just random damaging enemies in horror games, and I just find it annoying. It would have been better if you were safe and they were just platforming. I wish the setting was used a little bit more interestingly. A little slice of story would have gone a long way. So, overall, I didn't really find too much to enjoy in this one, unfortunately. A lot of potential, so it's a bit of a shame. I'm going to give this a 3 out of 10. And that's it. Those are the 10 games done, and To be honest, even though I was negative at some points, not a single one felt phoned in or worthless to me. Even the ones I didn't enjoy still have something interesting for me to linger on, or some strong art design, and even just a single mechanical detail that can work in a different context. Some of them are seriously great as well, either a small proof of concept or outright great experience all on their own. So just to recap, here are the games in Dread X from worst to best. Number 10, we've got Carthunk. Number 9 is Outsiders. Number 8 is Rotgut. Number 7 is Mr. Bucket Told Me To. Number 6, Pony Factory. Number 5, Shatter. Number 4, Pay Is Nice. The third best is Summer Nights. Second best is Don't Go Out. And my absolute favourite was Hand of Doom. This really is such a lovely project. A great way to highlight a bunch of different developers, experiment with all sorts of interesting ideas, and provide a unique spread of fun horror. None of them need to be particularly strong on their own, as they all uphold and support each other. And at such a cheap price, there is nothing to complain about. I love the Dread X collection, and I really do recommend it. If you've enjoyed this weird little video reviewing each of these titles, please do let me know. Subscribe if you'd like to see more, since I think the other 4 games in the Dread X series would be perfect to cover as well. Thank you so much for watching all the way through. I will see you later.